boy. BioShock 2. I don't think it's all that bad of a game.
I cannot believe it.
Hello my lunatics, I'm Moonspirit. Now if any of you have followed my channel since the beginning, you'll know that BioShock happens to be one of my favorite games of all time. That's why I intended to review it as my first video, and I cringe just thinking about it, and I'm way too embarrassed to even see it again. But since we're on the subject of BioShock, let me talk about BioShock 2, the unfortunate black sheep of the series. Because of how everyone universally lauded how masterful BioShock was, a sequel was going to be quite the ambitious task. When it finally came out, critics loved this game, but not as much as the first, but it was still fantastic nonetheless. The fans, however, were undoubtedly divisive to say the least, mostly saying this game was not great, let alone good. I, on the other hand, like this game, though my heart still goes to BioShock numero uno. So let's dive back into Rapture and discuss why BioShock 2 is not as bad as everyone has made it out to be. Oh, spoilers for those who haven't played this 6-year-old game. You've been warned. You play as Subject Delta, one of the very first Big Daddy prototypes ever made. While roaming Rapture with Eleanor, the little sister you're bound to life for, you are killed by Sophia Lamb, Eleanor's mother. You are then reawakened 10 years after the events of the first game, and you must find Eleanor and escape Rapture from Sophia Lamb, who is now the new ruler of Rapture. If you recall the story of the first, it encapsulated an escape from the underwater city from the clutches of a mad businessman who just wanted to keep his city safeguarded. And yet, the moment Andrew Ryan confronted the protagonist, he reveals something that has become one of the biggest and most thought-provoking twists in gaming history. The sequel doesn't have a moment like that, but that doesn't mean it had to have one. An event like that cannot be replicated, and it shouldn't, because that would be retreading from its predecessor, which would make the game all the more samey. Speaking of more or less the same, many have claimed revisiting Rapture wasn't as breathtaking as it was when they first came to the city. I won't deny that, but remember that Rapture is an underwater city, which clearly means that there's more of the city you can explore. While we've only reached the more prominent parts of Rapture, we explore more of the older parts of the metropolis, especially since the mode of transportation you use for most of the game is an aquatic subway called the Atlantic Express. The key difference is that unlike the first game, which had you use bathyspheres to travel from place to place, the subway is a one-way trip, which means you couldn't go back to previous areas, so you have to be thorough if you want to find everything or they're lost forever. But enough about how you travel, let's talk about where you travel. First, wake up in the Mar-a-Lago of Rapture, Adonis Luxury Resort, which you later travel to the Atlantic Express. You then travel to Ryan Amusements, Andrew Ryan's propaganda amusement park that glorifies the Rapture way and paint the surface world as unfit and unsavory, but was meant to keep the children from asking questions about the service. Pauper's Drop is Rapture's Hooverville, which initially served as a temporary habitat for workers of the railway, but now has become permanent for those who need affordable housing. Siren's Alley is the red light district of Rapture, complete with arcades for peep shows and casinos, but also became a church for Lamb's sermons. Dionysus Park was Sophia Lamb's private retreat for artists that was once flooded. Fontaine Futuristics was the main hub of Rapture's plasmids and other fantastical innovations that was bought out by Ryan Industries, and remnants of said purchase are littered with boxes wrapped in yellow tape. And finally, there is Persephone, Rapture's prison where Andrew Ryan keeps all the blacklisted prisoners here, where they literally disappear from the public eyes. Which is ironic since Persephone is the Greek goddess who became the wife of Hades, ruler of the underworld. But what is a city without its citizens? And once again, the city is filled with the Splicers. But now there are new residents of Rapture like the Brute Splicer, a hulky behemoth with his immense strength. A new Big Daddy is introduced called the Rumbler, which is equipped with a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher and mini turrets. Funny enough, you do get a sneak peek of the Rumbler in the beginning parts of the game, so you get a taste of what kind of troubles are ahead. Near the final levels, you'll come face to face with the other Alpha series of your type that have been reduced to glorified foot soldiers. But the biggest adversary to be wary of is the Big Sister, which are the little sisters all grown up, and they do not fuck around. Unlike the imposing Big Daddies, the Big Sisters are more agile and can throw fireballs or debris at you if you're not careful. But that's not all, for you must contend with some of Sophia's Rapture family. Grace Holloway is the queen of Popper's Drop, and she aims to kill you for taking Eleanor from her a long time ago. In Siren's Alley, you confront the Wales brothers, who turn into religious nutcases who worship Sophia Lamb as a divine being. Or at least one of them does. Stanley Poole is a newspaper reporter and Andrew Ryan's mole that infiltrated Sophia Lamb's family, and he stands in your way in Dionysus Park as he tells you to erase any traces of his dirty deeds to hide from her, in exchange that he lets you leave. And in Fontaine Futuristics, you encounter Alex the Great, who's been spliced up into a completely twisted, deformed, and gigantic fetus-like monstrosity. But remember Grace, Stanley, and Gilbert for later, as they play a more prominent role in the game. But there's one character that I'm kinda infatuated with, and his name is Augustus Sinclair. He serves as the new guide in this game, and I find him to be quite charming. Maybe it's because of his foghorn leghorn-like dialect that rubs me the right way, or maybe it's because he's morally grey. While he does plan to profit from Rapture's bounties, he also believes that same research can turn you back to normal, which means he can't be that bad as he does care about you. Hell, he shows himself in the flesh to prove that he's a man to be trusted. It's a shame what happens to him in the end. The gameplay in BioShock 2 has improved compared to its predecessor. You can now dual wield a weapon on one hand and a plasmid on the other, instead of switching them out. But now you're a Big Daddy and your weapons fit more to the motif, especially that huge drill of his, which is a huge plus. The gene bank has been streamlined into one big interface instead of just different categories. Hacking has also been refined as it's now a timing minigame that lasts seconds where you hit the right markers for a successful hack. Plus, the research camera now has film reels instead of snapshots where you can now interact with the subjects. The most common complaint is when you must protect the little sisters while they gather Adam. While yes, it does get repetitive to do this every single time, that's the point! Remember, you're a Big Daddy, and it's your duty to be the protector when splicers try to get your little sister. It may not be a great job, but it's a job, and you must deal with it. Plus, with your arsenal, plasmids, and the environment you're in, every Adam gathering varies. But enough about being a Big Daddy, let's talk about Subject Delta himself and who he really is. As it turns out, Subject Delta was a deep-sea diver only known as Johnny Topside, who stumbled upon Rapture, thus turning into a Rapture celebrity. But Andrew Ryan thought that old Johnny was a CIA or KGB, so he had you taken away and erased any information about you for good. Eventually, Johnny disappears, and out comes Subject Delta. At least we now get an idea of who is the man behind the diving suit. Collecting audio diaries is essential when learning the BioShock lore, especially how Sophia Lamb became the new ruler of Rapture. From her entering Rapture to her rise and fall of power, it's easy to see how she became quite the prominent figure, even if some fans find her inclusion to be somewhat shoehorned in. But it's also nice to find some overarching backstories that encompass the entire narrative, like Gilbert Alexander's involvement with the Protector program after Dr. Suchong's death, Stanley Poole's job to infiltrate and ruin the Rapture family, and how Sinclair became the man to go to for most of Rapture's financial problems. One of the big audio diaries to find throughout the game comes from Mark Meltzer, a man from the surface who's on a mission to find his missing daughter. Every diary you find of him shows his resolve to find his daughter, making you root for him, even though he's way over his head. Another is finding Eleanor's audio diaries that chronicles her life before and after she became a little sister. Sophia wanted Eleanor to be a good, perfect little girl, but she was a bit of a troublemaker as a child, as she is not as Sophia would have hoped. Eventually she was cured and rehabilitated from her condition of being a little sister, and she ends up resenting her mother for turning her into her pet project, which brings me to Sophia Lamb. One of the many complaints about BioShock 2 is they find the villain Sophia Lamb to be quite underwhelming. She obviously can't hold a candle to Andrew Ryan, one of the best modern villains in video games, but that doesn't mean she should. She is very imposing in her own way, as she treats her citizens like a helicopter mother, and she treats Delta almost as if he was a child who desperately needs discipline. While Andrew Ryan wants to save his city from the parasites and Frank Fontaine wants to steal Rapture's work for personal gain, Sophia Lamb's ambition is just as bad. She was initially brought to Rapture to alleviate the mental woes of Rapture's citizens because obviously they all suffer from a severe case of aquatic cabin fever. Her treatments, however, start to become a bit more devious as she turns her patients into her followers, which would lead to the creation of a socialistic community. And yes, it's basically communism, and Andrew Ryan will not have any of that in his city. So, to quell Lamb's influence, he had Lamb incarcerated and erased any traces of her within Rapture, making her nothing more than an echo of Rapture. Some would call it lazy writing as to just write her into the lore from her missing in the first game, but remember that Andrew Ryan wants his city to be perfect, which means any dissenters and doubters must vanish. And even though she brought Rapture back from its ashes after Ryan's passing, her plans were far from altruistic. In fact, she twisted those very notions to serve the common good of the world with Rapture's finest, which ironically was the reason why she left the surface, because the greater good used her philosophy to justify the Hiroshima bombing. She didn't have any long-term plans of staying in Rapture, for her ultimate plan was to create the first utopian. By putting all of Rapture's finest minds into a single host, it would make him or her the absolute practitioner of anything. And with some mental and psychological adjustments, like the WYK in Andrew Ryan's son Jack, Sophia will make that person into a utopian, and her perfect candidate was her daughter, Eleanor. While her intentions may seem pure, Sophia's idea of a utopian is to erase any free will within her and make her do good not because she wants to, but she's programmed to. Which brings me to a point made by Andrew Ryan, for he proclaims that the difference between a man and a slave is that a man chooses while the slave obeys. And that's what Sophia was doing to Eleanor, making her into a slave. By eliminating the self, as Sophia puts it, Eleanor would become the penultimate altruist, making her do good without question. In case you don't know, altruism is frowned upon in the Ayn Rand philosophy, but in this context, it makes perfect sense. Now, I'm not saying altruism is bad, because I do believe you should do the right thing because it's right and it should be your choice. But in the game's case, Sophia would have had Eleanor to be made into a slave of doing things for the greater good without questioning it because she can't. To me, that's the altruism Andrew Ryan despises, which is what makes this argument about Sophia's scheme poignant. Altruism is something that should be taught, not ingrained. Otherwise, you're either a slave to an ideal or someone just wanting to please someone. The endgame is a lot more satisfying as your actions carry a whole lot more weight than in BioShock 1. Remember the three characters I mentioned? Grace, Stanley, and Gilbert? In one section of the game, you play as a little sister and witness some of Rapture in her perspective. Through them, you don't just see Rapture as some heavenly paradise, you get to see statues of you depicting how you've treated the three. If you spared any of them, you're portrayed as a humane hero who shows mercy and forgiveness. If you killed any of them, you're viewed as wrathful and vengeful. Your actions towards the little sisters also carries weight as it changes Eleanor's personality, depending on who lives or dies. And it is evident when you're able to summon Eleanor to fight alongside you. Sparing all the little sisters make her think her freedom is something that should be cherished. Killing at least one of them, she believes that survival is the most important and whoever stands in the way must die. Even near the finale, the little sisters are involved, and how you've dealt with them also affects whether Eleanor will rescue them or harvest them. The same binary choice applies to the big three. You must make a choice between sparing their lives or killing them when you eventually confront them. The game never explicitly tells you to kill them because that decision is up to you, and the game does give you incentives. Grace sent all manners of trouble to you, though it was because of a grudge, according to Sinclair, and it was based off a misunderstanding that she believes you took Eleanor away from her. Stanley was the reason why Eleanor became a little sister, to hide his misdeeds to the Rapture family in Dionysus Park, but it is also revealed that Stanley is the reason why you became a big daddy too. Gilbert made various attempts at your life, but he has audio recordings as he chronicles his mental health, and to kill him, his final audio recording tells you to push a button to kill him. But the catch is, the button never glows as the game usually highlights objectives, but you can choose to push the button if you like. The game doesn't make it an objective to make the decision, for it is yours to decide, and even their fate directly correlates to Sophia Lamb's. Spare all of them, and Eleanor will give her mom a rebreather to survive from drowning. Kill any of them, and she'll drag Sophia down and drown her. Once you reach the surface, Eleanor will have an epilogue and reflect on what the future beholds as Delta passes on, based on the fates of the little sisters. Sparing all of them would let her absorb Delta as part of her, with a very optimistic outlook on a bright sunny horizon, surrounded by the cured little sisters. Kill any little sister, you can either refuse to let her absorb you, or allow her to. Refuse, and she mourns your death as the game ends on a melancholy mood on a cloudy day. Let her consume you, the sky becomes stormy and the water around her is surrounded by splicer corpses as she deviously awaits the world ahead of her. There are two DLCs that lengthen BioShock 2's longevity, the Protector Trials and Minerva's Den, but I recommend Minerva's Den as that is one of the best DLC out there. In this separate campaign, you play a different Big Daddy named Subject Sigma. You are guided by Charles Milton Porter, the head of Minerva's Den, and he needs Sigma's help to retrieve the Thinker, a super intelligent computer powered by Adam, and retrieve all its blueprints from his former colleague, Reed Wall, so they can escape to the surface. Reed intends to use the Thinker to create the predictive equation, an algorithm that he believes to predict just about anything. Bridget Tenenbaum also makes a slight return near the end, as she plans to use the Thinker's computation capabilities to find a cure for Rapture's spliced up citizens. This campaign plays the same, but with some new additions. You are given the Ion Laser, a laser rifle that can be fired for continuous damage, equipped with a heat laser and burst shot. An exclusive plasmid is introduced called the Gravity Well, which is a black polyp that unleashes a mini black hole that sucks up anything within its reach. And finally, there's a unique Big Daddy known as the Lancer, which looks like a golden knight with an ion laser. Throughout the game, you find audio logs of Charles trying to make the Thinker to be more human with the personality duplication functionality by feeding it audio recordings of his late wife. It also turns out that Reed has been feeding lies to Andrew Ryan to get rid of Porter so he can keep the Thinker to himself. Apparently, Sophia tried to reach out to Porter, though he refused to be part of her family. Let me just say that in the final moments of the game, it has a twist that I think fans were sorely looking for that was missing in the main game, and the very epilogue of this campaign is one of the most emotional moments I've felt in video games. Never felt this since the Burial at Sea DLC from BioShock Infinite. While BioShock 2 has its fair share of problems, it's still not as bad as many have made it out to be. It cannot compete with its superior predecessor, but play this game on its own merits and you might find it to be great regardless. Trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle is difficult, as BioShock Infinite tried to replicate that, which some find that it didn't meet those expectations. Regardless, I'd say this game was, and still is, a wonderful time. Play it whenever you can. Except for the Remastered Collection on PC, its save function is completely broken. So until then, I'm Moon Spirit, and that's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt, folks. With that said, I don't think King of the Crystal Skull is all that bad.